Reincarnated by mistake, Roy becomes the supreme alchemist with divine powers. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. A boy finds himself enveloped in a strange light, unsure of what's happening. Suddenly, he's taken to a goddess named Nolyn, who explains that he was summoned to Mildgard by a spell from another world. It turns out he was mistakenly caught in the summoning of others, so the goddess apologizes for the mix-up. The boy, even more confused, listens as she clarifies that world summoning involves countless targets across myriad worlds. For some reason, the boy, not originally intended to be summoned, got caught up in it. This poses a huge problem, as the summoning spell is incredibly dangerous. The laws of this world and Earth differ significantly, risking the collapse of Mildgard itself, which is why the spell was banned. However, one nation recklessly activated it again. The boy asks if others were also summoned, but Nolyn says no. The intended targets were summoned to the Holy Empire of Sidonia, where the spell was activated. Feeling helpless, the boy asks to be sent back, but Nolyn can't oblige. She's so incensed that she fixed things to ensure the forbidden spell would never be used again. Moreover, the boy doesn't even have a body to return to. At this, he realizes he is just a sphere of light and wonders about his fate. Nolyn asks him to give up on returning and try starting a new life in Mildgard. Hopeless, he inquires if he might be summoned to Sidonia, but the goddess explains that place is too troubled, and considering his accidental presence there, he'd likely be treated poorly in the Holy Empire. Feeling guilty for her actions, she considers sending him to a fantasy world with her full support. Meanwhile, the human only feels anxiety, as facing goblins and dragons isn't exactly appealing. However, Nolyn assures him her support will be crucial. She then asks him to visualize the word status. Upon doing so, a panel appears with information about the boy. His name is Takumi Aruma, 17 years old, but he's confused about the class section since he was a salaried worker in his previous life, and it states he has no class. Nolyn believes the past doesn't matter and explains there are no salaried workers in Mildgard. In this world, there are heroes, warriors, and mages in the combat class, while the production class includes herbalists, alchemists, blacksmiths, and more. Takumi, not fond of fighting, sees himself in the production class. Finding his comment exceedingly dull, Nolyn suggests that if Takumi utilizes the skills acquired through his actions, he might find employment. If he wishes to pursue production, the goddess can provide him with a useful spell for that, as well as recovery magic for protection and a few other things for his adventure. With that, she conjures a magical diamond and integrates it into the lost boy. He experiences a severe headache, but the goddess, ignoring this, wishes him a good journey in the continent of Asgard and sends him there without further explanation. Sometime later, a light streaks across the sky at high speed, crashing heavily into the ground. After partially recovering, Takumi stands up from the terrible experience and heads to a lake where he sees his reflection in the water and no longer recognizes himself. Gradually, he realizes this is his new appearance, which incidentally is much better looking than in his past life. With this, it becomes slightly easier for the boy to forget his past. Opening his bag, he finds some food and money to last him a while. Checking his status, Takumi sees the blessing of Goddess Nolyn and thinks it could cause trouble if people from there discover this. He also notices the item box, something familiar from RPG games he played on Earth. Additionally, Takumi has level 1 elemental spells of fire and water. Curious, he wonders if he can actually use these abilities. Fearing the spread of a fire spell, the boy summons a water ball and is impressed. Next, he casts a wind slash and then a stone ball. Through these actions, he realizes he truly is in a fantasy world. Regardless, Takumi needs to find a village, so he heads deeper into the forest in search of a logical path. At one point, he finds a log and uses his evaluation skill to discover it's treant wood, a high-quality resource collected from treant monsters used in staves, magical items, and spears. Seeing this, Takumi thinks he could work with this wood using his forging ability. Without delay, he visualizes a spear and activates the shaping, crafting a spear and acquiring the skill carpentry. Since he was able to use this wood, Takumi surveys the surrounding area to do something similar with local plants. Around him, dozens of plants form what he sees as a veritable treasure trove for potion and poison making, so he gathers a huge amount of ingredients but doesn't know what to do with all of it, as it certainly wouldn't fit in his bag. Then Takumi remembers his item box, a storage gift from Goddess Nolyn with an infinite limit. He places the ingredients inside. In the midst of this, a little girl appears, running desperately and hiding behind him. It turns out a huge horned rabbit was chasing her, so Takumi grabs his spear to defend himself. When the rabbit attacks, the boy closes his eyes in terror and strikes with his weapon. Luckily, the blade hits the animal's head and kills it. Because of this, Takumi gains the warrior class level 1, although he didn't want it. When the little girl thanks him for the help, she mentions she came from Board Village. She was collecting medicinal herbs and got lost in the forest. Hearing this, Takumi asks to accompany the girl to the village, which she accepts without hesitation. Thus, the boy collects the horned rabbit, but realizes he made a mistake by revealing the item box and now leaving the girl agape with this black hole from hell. One way or another, life goes on. So the girl tells him her name is Molly, and the two head toward Board Village. Meanwhile, in the sacred empire of Sidonia, the other summoned individuals look around trying to understand where they are. A boy asks if Akane is okay, and she admits she's not, but the important thing is to figure out what's happening. Soon, as the trio discusses the situation, a woman appears, thanking them for responding to the summons. Faced with demands for an explanation, she reveals that they are in a completely different world, summoned to use their powers as heroes to save this world. The mysterious woman then introduces herself as Elizabeth, the first empress of the sacred empire of Sidonia. Following this, the three summoned receive their powers. Akane gains the power of revelation, feeling inside that she cannot trust this strange woman as she seems dangerous. Later, Takumi arrives in Board Village and returns Molly to her relatives, who thank him for his help. The boy asks if he could stay in the village for a few days, and Molly's relatives agree, mentioning that the area is rich in ingredients for medicine and has nearby minerals, making Board a paradise for craftsmen. A younger man introduces an older one as Boban, a blacksmith skilled in mining, and Takumi is grateful for the opportunity to stay. Notably, as there are no inns in Board, the villagers decide to build a house for the visitor, something he did not expect. Soon, they find a small empty space in the territory for Takumi's residence. To show he's not just sitting around, the boy levels the ground with his magic, but it drains so much mana that he nearly fries his brain. The men are impressed by the foreigner's magic, as if they have had little contact with such things. Setting that aside, they inform him that they will take care of the rest of the construction. Takumi realizes that his new life has truly begun, and so far it doesn't seem bad at all. The next day, thanks to his skills in carpentry, forging, and woodworking, he single-handedly makes most of the furniture for his new home. However, the class he has gained still bothers him, so he wonders if he can change it. Exploring the menu, he discovers some selectable classes and chooses Alchemist. Examining the iron, copper, and silver ore he collected with Boban in the region, Takumi admires the main one, magical iron ore, a resource imbued with mana that can be transformed into ingots. Normally, this would require a large furnace to melt, but with his skills, Takumi can significantly expedite the process. According to him, alchemy consists of 5 techniques: decomposition, extraction, pulverization, synthesis, and recombination. After extracting the iron ore in this manner, the boy uses earth magic on it, producing the ingots. Later, Molly opens the door to Takumi's house to bring him dinner, but the boy had used so much mana that he looked like a spent user. Because of this, later on, Takumi gets scolded by Martha, Molly's mother, who teaches him to be more careful with such behavior. In turn, Banga, the girl's father, gives the alchemist a healing potion. After that day, Takumi starts to take it easier at work, but still, Martha and Molly come to check on the boy from time to time. Regardless, Takumi manages to level up to level 32 as an alchemist and 36 as a blacksmith. One day, while forging a blade, Boban asks the protagonist to increase the temperature with his magic, and with the help of the alchemist, the blacksmith is able to produce his best piece yet. That day, Takumi reaches level 40 as a blacksmith, although he really wanted to be an alchemist, a class that is falling behind still at level 33. Another day, Takumi goes to Banga and asks for some potions, as he plans to use ingredients to produce different potions. Banga agrees to the proposal, but asks the young man to sell some to him when he manages. Takumi then mixes crushed kittlek and water. With each stir in the pot, the color changes, reminding the boy of the experiments he used to do as a child. After finishing 2, he is not satisfied and sets out in search of new ingredients. At the beginning of his new expedition, the alchemist eats a plant and has a horrible reaction. Immediately, he uses the purification ability to heal himself, but although he survives, he collapses from exhaustion. Even though this is the quickest way for him to gain resistance and increase his light magic, he admits it's difficult. To make matters worse, the fortified giant boar charges at the boy. He reacts with his spear, but the beast's armor breaks the blade. Takumi tries all his magics, but none cause damage. Amidst the confusion, he ends up encountering a wounded venomous spider, which attacks the boar but is also thrown away. Unsure what to do, Takumi risks using the alchemist's decomposition magic on the boar, and the strategy ends up working. Even wounded, the boy goes to see how the spider is doing, as it seemed to try to help him. Because of this, the human heals the arachnid and gains the ability Tame, then tames the new partner and names her Key, because the pattern on her back looks like a cave leaf. Using her voice, the spider says she likes the name, and she evolves into an assassin spider and grows in size. Seeing that Takumi has returned to the village with the carcass of a fortified boar, the people are stunned and terrified by the spider he carries on his back. However, Takumi explains that he has tamed the arachnid, so the villagers prepare a feast to eat the boar. At night, during the celebration, Banga gives the animal materials for the leather armor Takumi requested and advises the boy to sell the leftovers in the city of Bolton. Amidst this, Banga and Bobon discuss how everything has improved since Takumi's arrival. Early the next morning somewhere, a woman watches intently through a window. Meanwhile, Nolyn follows Takumi's steps and likes what he sees. Another goddess approaches and asks what Nolyn expects of him, as in addition to giving the boy a special blessing, she sent him to the past a year before Sidonia activated the summoning spell. However, Nolyn responds that she has no specific reason. The following day, Takumi was lecturing Keed for having woken up entangled in her web, not to mention she had covered the entire room with that type of silk. The spider apologized and explained that she felt very lonely, which is why she wanted to keep her master with her a little longer since he was always so busy. Upon hearing this, Takumi realized he had indeed been neglecting Keed, spending all of his time crafting potions and other items. Reflecting on this, he apologized as well and promised to take a break from work to spend some time with his friend. Overjoyed, the spider leaped onto the human just as Martha suddenly arrived with a meal and witnessed the odd scene. Takumi tried to explain that his pet wasn't trying to eat him, but Martha had already noticed the amount of spider silk in the room and saw potential in it. Not wanting to waste the material, she crafted some clothes from the silk, and her friends were amazed by the outcome. Watching this, Takumi hadn't realized spider silk was so incredible, and the women explained that it was a luxurious item highly sought after by nobles. Martha tried to communicate with Keed, requesting some more elastic silk, and the spider managed to understand and provided the material. Just as Takumi called his pet to play, it was her turn to say she was too busy, her expression full of resentment. Eventually, the young man backed off, happy that his friend was enjoying herself. Since he was free, he decided to return to his work. Looking around, he realized it had been almost a month since he arrived in the village, and he felt he would soon need to study alchemy in the big city. However, he didn't want to leave without making his mark on this place where everyone had been so kind to him. Later, Takumi went to Bobon and received his armor. Besides that, the blacksmith mentioned he needed to fix the soles and tips of the young man's boots as they weren't suitable for facing the forest monsters. Takumi argued that he was just a producer and didn't deal with such matters, but Boba knew very well that Takumi often wandered alone through the woods and wasn't exactly who he claimed to be. Just then, Banga arrived to see the boy's armor and mentioned that for his production work to evolve, Takumi needed to move to a city where the demand and supply of materials were greater. With this in mind, the man noted that merchants from Bolton were coming to the village next week, and he had arranged a ride for Takumi in their carriage. In other words, the protagonist was moving to Bolton. Moved, he thanked his friends who had supported him so much. Excited, Takumi met with Martha and saw that she was about to throw away the entrails of a horned rabbit that Banga had hunted. Although it was the tastiest part of the animal, if used as it was, there was a risk of disease or parasites. However, Takumi used his purification magic to solve the problem. Right away, Martha was impressed that the young man could use light magic and thanked him for his great help, but she warned him not to use such spells in front of others, as few people were capable of it, and those who could live off this rare magic. Martha said no one in Board Village would mind, but since Takumi was heading to the big city, he'd better be careful. Waiting for the Bolton merchants, Takumi used his week to give back to the village, working on its development and making it as safe and practical as possible, with a high wall and more sophisticated production equipment. As the days passed, Papek, the merchant, arrived in Board and was surprised to see the wall. After negotiating with the villagers, Takumi was ready to travel. Boban asked if the boy wasn't forgetting anything, and he remembered to hand over 100 healing potions he had produced for Banga in case they were needed by the villagers. Pepek was impressed with the substance and held the bottle up to the sun to admire its glow. At that moment, Martha and the other villagers came to bid Takumi farewell. Molly asked where Key was, and the pet's owner said she was sleeping. Banga and Bowman urged the boy to stay strong and take care, while Martha handed over a tunic that some villagers had personally produced for the Alchemist with the help of threads produced by Keed. Moved by so much affection, Takumi bowed to thank everyone for all they had given him. Soon, he boarded the carriage and left with tears in his eyes. After all, this was the first city where he had lived in Mildgard, and he came to consider it his homeland. During the journey, Pempek commented that Takumi was very loved by the inhabitants of Board. Heath, one of the travelers, couldn't hold back his tears at the beautiful scene he had witnessed. Then, everyone introduced themselves, starting with Heath himself. Next, Riel introduced herself and pointed out that the quiet bald man was Bogar. Pepek explained that these three formed a rank C group of adventurers known as the Lion's Fangs. Heath explained that they were guarding the caravan, although Rio was bored with how calm the environment was, so much so that she would love for some monster to appear. By the way, he commented that Takumi was holding his bag as if it contained something very important, and the boy revealed that inside was his pet assassin spider. Unaware of the danger, Rio peeked inside the bag to see the creature but ended up being attacked. Afterward, Keed clung to Bogar, who embraced the spider affectionately. Bet and Papek asked if Takumi had more of that healing potion, as he would love to buy it. As soon as the alchemist confirmed, the merchant abruptly stopped the carriage and looked shocked. The adventurers grabbed their weapons, thinking it might be a monster, and indeed, a group of goblins approached the carriage. The lion's fangs quickly left the carriage to do their job, and Rio, noticing that there were about 20 more of these monsters inside the forest, alerted her companions that she would lure these enemies by shooting arrows at them. Meanwhile, Heath and Bogar confronted the goblins in hand-to-hand combat. Two monsters surprised Papek and Takumi by circling the carriage, but not Rio, who killed the two with her bow. With the battle over, the archer announced that it was time to dissect the creatures and collect their magic stones. At night, Takumi reflected that the journey had proceeded without further problems. 3 days later, the caravan arrives in Bolton, in the kingdom of Barkula. Everything in that city feels totally new to our protagonist, since it's the first big town he's ever set foot in within Mildgard. Wasting no time, he heads straight to the Adventurers Guild alongside the 3 members of Lion's Fangs who need to report the success of their escort mission. Takumi himself has to register at the guild so he can stay in the city, and he also needs to list Keed as his pet. At the reception desk, he makes it clear he'd rather join some kind of alchemist's guild, but the attendant explains that such a guild doesn't exist. He also mentions that plenty of people sign up at the Adventurers Guild anyway, just to get an ID card. If Takumi doesn't mind staying at the lowest rank, his registration never expires and he can still accept one simple quest per month. In the end, Takumi decides to register with the Adventurers Guild and officially lists Keed as his pet. Next, the alchemist heads over to Papek's company to strike a deal for 100 potions with the owner. The businessman offers 10 silver coins for each basic healing and stamina potion and 50 for each mana potion. Takumi quickly does the math in his head and almost faints when he realizes that all of this adds up to around 7 million yen, roughly 270,000 rias. On top of that, Papek mentions he shaved the price down a bit because Takumi's still unknown in these parts. Honestly, Takumi thinks it's too good to be true and figures there must be some hidden reason why Papek would pay so much for someone he barely knows, even though he doesn't look like a swindler. By the way, Papek also brings up where Takumi plans to live. If Takumi's serious about working as a producer, he ought to have a house or workshop. Takumi immediately points out he's short on funds, but Papek insists on showing him a property for rent. So he calls Thomas, one of his employees, and asks him to escort the newcomer to his potential new home. Soon enough, Takumi is brought to an absolute mansion and completely loses his composure, never expecting to live somewhere like that. Thomas tells him the rent is 1 gold and 50 silver coins per month, which is way cheaper than Takumi imagined. He even jokes if someone died in this pigsty, and Thomas assures him that's not the case. Looking around, the alchemist notices there's a storage room he could repurpose as a workshop, and he figures he'll pay the rent with his soon-to-be potion money. Keed wakes up and asks where they are, so Takumi explains that this is their new home. When Thomas inquires whether the young man's made up his mind, Takumi decides to take the place. With that settled, they head out of the property, and Thomas mentions that they'll prepare everything for the move tomorrow. Suddenly, a foul smell catches Takumi's attention. Thomas explains that it's the city's sewer problem. The nobles can afford magic devices to deal with it in their mansions, but commoners aren't so lucky. Those purification devices have to be excavated from dungeons or ancient ruins, and they cost a fortune. Sometimes priests are hired to purify the sewage, but it's only a temporary measure. The next day, Takumi moves in and sets up his workshop. He leaves the outer wall repairs for later because there's something else he wants to take care of first. With that in mind, he mixes quartz into the clay he bought from Papek's company, then uses magic to shape it. Once it's dry, he applies heat and uses space-time magic to speed up the firing process. After a lot of work, his alchemy and light magic both level up, though he's left with hardly any mana, feeling like nothing but Batman's empty cape. Still, he manages what he set out to do. He's now got a top-notch toilet in his bathroom. In the middle of celebrating, he hears Papek shouting, so he rushes over to see what's going on. Turns out the merchant is covered in spider web. According to Keed, people usually love that kind of welcome, but Takumi insists only the kids back in his village thought it was fun. Papek, however, seems oddly comfortable with the web's texture. After freeing the businessman, Takumi apologizes for the trouble, but Papek waves it off. Then he asks to use the bathroom, only to be startled when he sees the toilet inside. Takumi explains that it's a magical toilet fitted with a device that decomposes waste through purification, cleaning the water and leaving just a tiny bit of inorganic residue. Impressed, Papek asks if the young man has a knack for light magic, but Takumi recalls Martha telling him to keep that under wraps, so he asks the merchant to keep it a secret. Papek promises and immediately orders 100 more of these toilets. Yet he also suggests Takumi get a contract with a slave because if he can use light magic, his talent is too valuable to leave unprotected. In other words, the slave would guard both the property and its owner, and would be bound to keep things confidential. After all, Takumi is rumored to be a chosen one of God, at least according to the Church of the Divine Light, which leads the Holy Empire of Sidonia. They'll snatch up anyone with an aptitude for light magic and profit off their healing magic, so they won't just sit around while he uses purification magic to help ordinary folks who can't afford it. Papek does have a few ideas to get enough support for producing these toilets, but it's crucial to keep Takumi's name out of the public eye. Even so, Takumi makes it clear he's against slavery and would rather handle everything himself. Suddenly, Takumi's guild card starts to glow. A notification says he's got 1 month from the time of registration to complete a quest at his level. Realizing he's got too much on his plate, he admits he really could use some help. Papek asks if Takumi has time to spare that day. Without missing a beat, the merchant leads Takumi to Nolyn & Co., the most reputable slave market in Bolton. While Papek takes care of some business there, Takumi steps into the garden and meets a woman who immediately tells him to get lost before he can say a word. She doesn't know how the boy ended up there, but she makes it clear that this is no place for children. Meanwhile, the company owner introduces herself to Papek as Nolyn. Papek explains that Takumi is looking for a servant, although he is hesitant to enter into such a contract. According to Takumi, having a servant was something that simply didn't exist where he came from. Nolyn mentions that it is true that once a contract is signed between the servant and the master, it binds him to their service. However, at least in the kingdom of Barkula, servants' rights are protected, including the provision of food, clothing, and shelter, and it is forbidden to force the servant to perform actions not described in the contract. For their part, servants are prohibited from sharing information about their master. This is definitely different from what Takumi believed, and it helps him change his mind. Nolyn then explains the common types of contracts. Those who became servants due to debts have a contract that lasts until the debt is paid. Typically, these are criminals. Prisoners of war, on the other hand, submit to this to secure a place to live. Moreover, there are contracts with people who were captured and illegally forced into servitude, which is the most common case. In Papek's opinion, it would be more interesting for Takumi to have one of the war prisoners who cannot be released without their master's permission because he is a producer with skills and talents others cannot imitate. Takumi adds that he would like to focus on his work as much as possible, but he also has missions from the Adventurers Guild and currently cannot handle day-to-day tasks. In other words, he needs someone to manage the tasks of his mansion. Now the main point is that there are secrets involving Takumi's abilities, so he needs to ensure there will be no problems regarding this. The boy also imagines he will venture into dangerous places to find materials and resources for his production, so it would be important if the servant had combat experience to accompany the expeditions. Following the client's intentions, Nolyn imagines he needs 2 servants, so she brings young Maria to the meeting room, a girl who was kidnapped by bandits when she was little and no longer has any family. She has been trained to read, write, calculate, and perform household tasks. Awkward in front of the girl, Takumi explains that his house has a living room, a dining room, and a kitchen on the first floor, while the second floor has 4 bedrooms and a bathroom. Knowing this, Takumi asks if Maria can handle the job. Without hesitation, she confirms that she can, but asks why the contractor seems so troubled. In fact, Takumi doesn't understand how such a beautiful person has not yet been chosen by any master, and when he hears this, Maria is visibly embarrassed and explains that she can only perform domestic tasks and could not join the master on adventures. Desperate, Takumi tries to clarify that he meant no harm and doesn't expect that from her, so Nolyn wishes to proceed with the contract once the two have understood each other. Now, as for the servant with combat experience that the client is looking for, the businesswoman doesn't have any war servants available at the moment. Maria argues that they have Sophia, but Nolyn makes it clear that the girl should not interfere in this matter and sends her back to the room to pack her bag. After Maria leaves, Takumi asks about Sophia, and Nolyn reveals that she has problems but does not go into details, leaving Takumi curious. Eventually, the businesswoman promises to contact him when she has a candidate who fits what the boy needs, but the client, guided by his intuition skill, insists on meeting Sophia. Thus, Nolyn takes the young man to the elf's room and explains that she was captured in the war between the kingdoms of Triuria and Yugur about 50 years ago. The kingdom of Yugur was a nation of elves. For various reasons, Sophia never signed a contract with anyone, with a severe injury on her left ear and an impediment in her right hand and left leg, in addition to her spiritual elemental magic, unique to elves, being sealed. For this reason, Nolyn believes that Sophia was placed under some kind of curse. Nevertheless, such flaws are fatal for a fighter. After hearing every detail, Takumi asks to speak with the elf, and Nolyn allows it, much to Sophia's own surprise, as she visibly didn't want to talk to the human boy. Either way, the company owner leaves the room, then Takumi introduces himself. Without saying his name, Sophia makes it clear she won't be useful to him. But Takumi holds the woman's face to see her status and discovers she is extremely powerful, hitting level 64, although her problem with debilitated limbs lowers her status by 100, and the exorcism curse she suffers from prevents her from using her mana. Still, Takumi imagines he might find a way to break this curse and use such a skilled figure in his expeditions. At that moment, Nolyn enters the room looking for an answer, and Takumi confirms he wants a contract with Sophia Sylphid because he feels he can solve her problems. Nolyn reminds him that these are issues that have gone unresolved for over 50 years, but the boy confirms without hesitation. With that, the businesswoman bursts out laughing and assures the elf to the client. Sophia grumbles because of the decision, then Takumi asks her to be honest and say if she doesn't want to go with him. However, even clenching her fists in anger, Sophia responds that it is not necessary to confirm the desires of a mere servant. Be that as it may, the contract is now firmly established between both parties, and Maria thanks Takumi for hiring Sophia along with her. Then Nolyn casts a spell as proof of the contract, concluding the entire process definitively. Maria promises to work hard to be kept as a servant of Takumi for many years, and even Sophia lowers her guard a bit and thanks the master for having been received. Also because of this, Nolyn thinks she has finally found a good master for the two. Right after Takumi brings them home, as soon as he opens the front door, he's knocked to the ground by Keed. Immediately, Sophia instructs Maria to stay away from the monster, while the homeowner tries to explain that this is his pet and introduces everyone. Although she understands, Sophia is puzzled by the master having a deadly spider as a pet. Then Takumi shows the elf a very spacious room and informs her that the one next door will be for Maria. The maids are shocked to have individual rooms, and Sophia even refuses at first, thinking it's too luxurious. But Takumi insists there are enough rooms for everyone to use. Additionally, the mansion features a bathtub that everyone can use. Sophia thinks the master should use it first to avoid bathing in used water, but he explains that the tub has a magical device that keeps everything clean. In the next scene, the servants try out the bath, and Maria is quite happy with the reality she has found. By the way, she mentions she thought Nolyn would never let them go. After all, she never made a contract with anyone, no matter how much money was offered. However, she recognized Takumi as a good master. Still, Sophia had a look at the contract, and details like the master's birthplace and lineage were blank. Because of this, the elf suspects the boy might be hiding something. Later, the pair is surprised by dinner ready on the table. Although it seems like a good thing, Maria despairs, thinking she's useless since that was her job. Takumi explains that he just made dinner today, and tomorrow she will take over the kitchen, so she asks to at least wash the dishes. After calming the girl down, Takumi invites everyone to the meal, and Sophia remarks that it's normal for the master to eat separately from the servants, but he insists he doesn't want things to be that way. Moreover, he would love it if they didn't call him master and instead used his name. The next day, Takumi goes to the Papek business company and receives a magical parcel with the items he ordered. Then he was walking down the street and noticed a church he had never seen before, so he enters it to thank Goddess Nolyn for all the blessings that have elevated his life at such a gratifying level. However, during his prayer, he wants to know why the goddess told him to be wary of the Holy Empire of Sidonia, since they control religion in this country. To answer his question, Nolyn personally takes the human to the sky and explains that she has nothing to do with Sidonia and its Church of Divine Light. In fact, there are two religions in this world: the Church of Creation, which has always worshipped Nolyn from the beginning, and the Church of Divine Light, which was created later and worships a non-existent god. After founding this church, the Holy Empire of Sidonia used force to spread its influence, but Nolyn did not interfere to preserve human beings' freedom of action. However, Sidonia managed to activate the spell of summoning from another world, leading to the accident that resulted in summoning Iruma Takumi. It was for this reason that Nolyn bestowed her blessing on this human. By the way, she warns that the apology blessing will last forever, but as the boy expands in this world, the part of the blessing that helped him grow and meet good people will fade. That is, everything that was going well until now may turn upside down. Upon learning this, Takumi better understands why he has met so many good people so far, and that from now on, everything depends solely on him. A year later, in the Holy Empire of Sidonia, a leader seated on his throne asks a subordinate how the summoned heroes are doing. The response is that the three are training with Homer and Packard. Although they were reluctant as soon as they were summoned, Elizabeth managed to convince them to serve the Empire. Speaking of them, Akira and Yamato were training their sword skills, and the demand for them to give their best was immense. In the middle of a mistake by Yamato, a man arrives and asks if that is all he has, and this phrase triggers a memory of the young man being defeated in a fight by Ippen. Since then, everyone thought Yamato was lost, but to not repeat the failure, the boy raises his sword again and returns to the fight. Meanwhile, Akane is also called for training, but she refuses because she hates violence. At this moment, Elizabeth arrives and explains that this is not violence but the strength necessary to save this world, while Akira promises to protect his comrade come what may. The princess emphasizes that Akane's companions are very inspiring, but all the girl feels is repulsion for Elizabeth because to this day she is certain that this woman is dangerous. Meanwhile, Takumi has just arrived home and as always is knocked down by his pet spider. Maria and Sophia rush to help the master pick up his things from the floor, but just as the elf was about to grab the magical parcel, the boy tosses it straight into his item box to prevent the maid from touching it, and this generates even more doubts in her mind. Because of this, she goes to Takumi's workshop to spy on him and sees him acting bizarrely and even cutting his own arm with a knife dipped in a strange substance. To make matters worse, he speaks alone saying Maria is terrible, and that was the last straw for Sophia to burst into the workshop and knock Takumi down, asking what he plans to do with Maria. However, the elf faints in the middle of this, so Takumi checks her status and discovers she has exhaustion and a wound on her left hand. Immediately, he heals the wound and levels up with his light magic. Later, he puts Sophia to rest in a bed, and Maria explains that the curse makes the elf tired from time to time. Thus, Takumi combines the dissipate and extra heal magics, thereby recovering Sophia's ear. With this, the alchemist believes the elf can fight as before. Later, Sophia wakes up and urges Maria to flee from Takumi as quickly as possible, but the younger girl explains that the master is a good person and has cured her of the curse. At this, the elf notices that the mana circulation has returned to her body. Because of this, she demands an explanation from her boss, who then reveals that he needed one more level of light magic to break the curse, and the purple liquid in that bottle comes from the poisonous Nenum herb, which he had ordered from Papek. By injuring himself and then healing, he managed to level up enough to learn extra heal. Sophia asks why he called Maria terrible, and he explains that she had mixed up his medicinal plants and accidentally thrown them away. Acknowledging Takumi's deed, the maid then swears loyalty to her master for the rest of her life. The next day, Takumi heads to a large local library, but is frustrated to find only 4 alchemy books there. Apparently, alchemy is on the decline, and he suspects it's because it relies on the script of an ancient magical civilization, which greatly limits access to proper translations. Fortunately, since his reincarnation, Takumi can understand all languages of this world, likely due to the blessing of Nolyn. As soon as he gets home, Maria comments that she'll never forget the cutest scene she's ever witnessed. Sophia, on her knees before the boy as if a knight vowing to defend a princess forever. Cade fully agrees on the beauty of this drama, while Takumi is not too pleased to be cast as the princess in the story. Later, the alchemist finishes producing the toilet seats he had promised to Papek, then considers taking a break from crafting. Maria asks if he's going to produce something else, so he shares that he will, but he's also thinking about taking an aimless trip. He wants to try finding unique materials and meals, see tourist spots, and explore some ruins. The plan is to take Sophia as a bodyguard, while Maria stays home to manage everything. Cade asks about her role in the trip, so the owner reminds her that she's a pet, thus she goes along. Seeing she would be left alone, Maria begs to join her friends, but the master reminds that he needs someone to handle the household tasks. In response, the girl dramatically tries to persuade him, arguing that being alone in that mansion would be like being an isolated toilet in a scorching desert or even less significant. Takumi reflects that this girl always makes toilet analogies, but aside from that, it really is concerning to leave her alone in the house, especially with that look of needy pleading. So trying to find something to convince him to change his mind, the alchemist himself uses his evaluation magic and checks Maria's status. To his surprise, she has attributes with interesting potential as a warrior, which sways the boy's decision. Sophia reinforces her friend's request, saying she could teach them both to fight on this trip, and Takumi finally gives in, allowing the younger maid to join them. With that settled, it's time to produce the armaments for the trip. Takumi asks what kind of weapon Sophia would want, and she opts for a long sword and a 2.5-meter spear, along with a bow and 2 knives. Somewhat startled by the elf's demands, the alchemist asks if she also wants a shield, so she takes the opportunity to request a buckler, which is a smaller, lighter shield. Afterward, the young man poses the same question to the other maid, and since she was trained in the use of short blades at the Nolyn Company, a dagger or short sword would be good. However, Sophia warns that her friend's attack power might suffer if she only carries those, so she offers to teach the girl how to use a spear. At night, the protagonist sets aside some magical steel ingots to produce the equipment. In this world, metals need to be more than just hard, otherwise they're useless. The next day, spear training begins and Sophia asks Maria to repeat some attack moves, but this time with her lumber lowered. As the instructor demonstrates the move, the human is amazed by the sound produced by the strike. Meanwhile, Takumi continues working on the armaments and is about to finalize the spear blades after consuming an absurd amount of mana with so much work, which at least leveled up several of his skills and classes. The young man adds a wing pattern to Sophia's weapon and a flame pattern to Maria's. Now he applies the attack enhancement and self-repair enchantments to both. Next, he thinks about what to do with Maria's knives. Considering that she's a combat maid, it would be cool to have these knives sheathed on her thigh. Suddenly, even though she's far away, Maria feels a strange chill on her thigh and feels the need to cover her body even though she was already covered. Returning to the brilliant alchemist and blacksmith, he would need to measure both girls to know the exact size of their armor, but he doesn't dare ask this personally, so he finds an unusual solution to this problem: constructing dolls of the two. Although it's somewhat peculiar, the young man feels more comfortable working this way than having to involve the two in the process. Once that's done, he considers it would be interesting to use the shell and leather of the fortified giant boar as material, along with fabric made from Cade's threads. For the design, the clever guy decides to exercise his right as master to produce armor that pleases his taste. Soon after all the manufacturing, there stand Maria and Sophia in their respective armors. Maria finds hers so perfect she can hardly believe it's real, and the elf emphasizes that the garment suited her as soon as she put it on. She just doesn't understand how Takumi was able to produce something so fitting to their size. Cade was about to rat out that the guy used dolls, so the boy changes the subject and emphasizes that the defense must be very good too because of the spider web used in the making. Then he shows the weapons to the two, being Sophia's sword and Maria's knives. Lastly, he gives each a mithril magic ring, which will serve as a focus for casting spells. Sophia says that must have used a lot of mana to make, but the blacksmith explains that he also trains when producing these items, so it's advantageous for him either way, especially since it was thanks to this that he acquired ice and lightning magic. Next, they head to the Adventurers Guild to register the maids as adventurers. Without delay, they receive their rank A identity cards, and Takumi takes the opportunity to register the trio as a group before the journey, planning to pick up some rank G and A missions. Sophia reminds him that he won't earn any experience points with such low-level missions, but his goal isn't to level up. In the midst of this, a group of tough-looking men approaches to hassle the girls, telling them they should ditch this wimp and explore the world with real men like them. Being all rank D, they're sure they can take much better care of them than some anemic kid with old lady hair. Not to be outdone, Takumi steps forward and faces the tough guys who can hardly believe that such a kid is trying to stand up to them. Internally, Takumi is terrified, but he maintains his cool, calculated exterior to not admit that he's nearly messing his pants. Feeling confident, a big guy punches the boy in the head, but Takumi stiffens his body, making it seem like the opponent punched a concrete wall. At that moment, a man arrives to scold the troublemakers and asks if the adventurer's scraped arm was the work of the little guy there. Takumi scratches his face and chokes on his words, while Maria tries to explain that the poor guy did nothing. The man isn't convinced by this story, so Hans, who attended to the group, defends Takumi, saying it was the big guys who started the provocation. The employee then informs them that this man is Barak, the master of the local guild. Barak orders the healing of the fool who punched his colleague's forehead, while telling the kid who took the blow to follow him. In the master's office, Takumi is asked about what exactly happened, but he remains stuck in a freeze and can't spit it out. The receptionist detected traces of mana in the fight, so he asks if it involved the use of magic. Takumi is impressed by the guy's magic sensing skill, but explains that no spell was cast. In fact, he took some coal from the item box, synthesized it into diamond, and covered his upper body with it. With that said, Hans understands why Takumi first came to the guild looking for an alchemist's guild. Barak asks if the two girls alongside are part of the boys' group, and they agree. Stating that they are very beautiful women, the clerk suggests that the master should upgrade their group to rank D right away, and the man agrees that's the best thing to do, as it will keep less jerks like those trying to approach them. Takumi is confused as he had just registered these people in the guild, and they are already wanting to promote them out of nowhere. It even seems like he's the protagonist of an anime. Since the alchemist doesn't want an easy game, the employee suggests that the group take on some missions that he will personally set aside to help them climb quickly, and the three agree to the idea. Without delay, Hans prepares 3 missions for the team, one to exterminate goblins, another to finish off kobolds, and the last to collect merrill herbs. On the first mission, Keed alerts the master that there are 4 goblins lurking in the forest, so Sophia asks for the coordinates to eliminate the first 2 by surprise. The last ones attack the group of humans directly, and Takumi reflects that the missions he took are all rank G or free classification, and the reward was 5 or 6 silver coins, which isn't that low. The thing is, they're finding way more goblins and kobolds than they needed. Sophia thinks there might be some camp of these monsters nearby, usually commanded by a rank C goblin general. Takumi thinks they should head home to avoid a beating, but Sophia and Maria are sure they can invade this enemy territory. Meanwhile, Keed warns that she's about to evolve, so the master sends her into a portal for her to rest a bit. Sophia asks if this was a mobile dimension, and Takumi awkwardly replies that he learned to use it when his space-time magic reached level 3. Then they enter the goblins' camp, and the elf estimates there are between 300 and 400 goblins. Takumi freaks out even more and questions if it's really necessary for them to face all these people, but Sophia is sure they can reduce a large part of these numbers with long-range magic. With that said, they cast spells using the rings and launch them at the horde, causing absolute devastation. However, it's not over yet, as this is when the enemy's general appears along with the Goblin Knight, both of superior species. Finally, since he's there, Takumi dives into the monsters, even though he was scared to death, and relies on his magic to help in the fight. Hours later, the group returns to the guild exhausted after having completed all the missions passed in half a day. Not believing this, Hans asks the people to have a word with the guild master. In the meantime, Barak mentions that he needs an extermination squad with several members above rank D when suddenly, Cade emerges from the portal punching the master's bald head and showing off her evolution. Sophia and Takumi don't know what to think about this, but Maria loves the new phase of the spider, as does Cade, who always wanted to chat with the redhead and now can do that. Finally, before separating their reward, Hans announces that Takumi has moved up to rank E, while the girls in the group have moved to rank F. Later at home, Maria asks the master for some fabric scraps to make underwear for her and Sophia. Takumi thinks it would be difficult to produce these garments from scraps, but the girl makes a drawing to show that it's not as complicated as one might think. Then Takumi draws a sketch of much shorter underwear, thinking that was the norm, and although he was embarrassed, Maria asks him to make them in that style. In the midst of this, Keed informs them that Pepek has arrived, but since he fainted as soon as he set eyes on the mutant spider, she threw him in the living room to get some air. Later, when he recovers, the businessman informs them that Lord Bolton, Marcus Godwin, wants to meet the Alchemist to talk about the device with purification magic. Without delay, they head to the big city, and Lord Bolton expresses his amazement at the effectiveness of the device for preventing plagues and feels a deep debt to the young man, bowing before him. Takumi is embarrassed to see a leader of such stature bow, but Godwin is comfortable doing this as often as necessary if it will improve his domain. Moreover, Takumi had managed to defeat a goblin camp, something even Bolton's own knights had failed to do. For this reason, the Lord asks Takumi to prioritize his safety from now on, as it would be a tremendous loss to society if anything bad happened to the Alchemist. Therefore, he must not let his guard down, especially when the Sacred Empire of Sidonia comes after him. A few days after this trip, the boy is exhausted while Keed finishes the undergarments he had ordered. He goes to deliver the pieces to the girls, who discover that the poor guy spent 3 days in the workshop producing these clothes. They hurry to try them on, and as Takumi thinks they will strip right there, he dashes out as quickly as he can to his room. Upon arriving, he thinks he's going mad, all because Nolyn's blessing is coming to an end. Out of his mind, the kid sees the image of his inner devil, telling him that, in fact, he feels this way because he wanted to try on the panties and brag, prompting Takumi to let out a scream of horror. The next day, the alchemist excitedly unveils his latest creation, the refrigerator. Cade opens the door and marvels at the cool breeze, while the master explains that it keeps food cold to prevent spoilage. With that said, the 3 women in the house were enjoying the cool air from the refrigerators, so the developer asked them to avoid leaving the door open. During the creation process, Takumi synthesized iron, chromium, and nickel into an alloy. Then he used stainless steel, shaped it into a rectangle, and placed a cooling enchantment on it. Maria thanks him for the incredible discovery because now she can cook with fresh ingredients at any time. Takumi asks which color she prefers, so the maid turns to her friend Sophia, as she finds it hard to choose between the 3. Sophia says she prefers blue, so Takumi leaves that refrigerator with the girls and mentions he'll take the rest to Pepek. Later, he plans to upgrade the household's equipment, inspired by an idea after a battle with General Goblin. Considering the armors are made of magical steel, he wanted to enhance their durability using mithril and adamantium. Takumi takes this idea to Hans, who isn't sure if there's a blacksmith in Bolton capable of handling such rare materials, but he assures he'll find someone capable in the dwarf kingdom of Namstal. In any case, the receptionist will provide a list of blacksmiths living in Bolton before the boy departs. And considering Takumi is an alchemist, it would be a process that consumes a lot of mana. But Hans mentions he could synthesize these materials, though it's faster to obtain them through mining. According to the attendant, there is a town called Horaz, northwest of the kingdom of Barkula, with a mine where the alchemist could extract mithril and adamantium. The problem is he won't be able to enter unless he's a member of the Blacksmiths Guild. However, there's a loophole. If he takes on a mission to defeat the monsters that appear in this mine, he would get the permission to extract the materials while on guild service. Meanwhile, Barak suddenly appears beside Takumi and announces that he has good news, as most adventurers are hunting black buffaloes at this time of year. This means there are few people collecting Trent wood, hence Bolton is running low on this resource, which brings many problems to the city. By the way, he mentions that Trents live in the Death Forest, along the road to Horaz. If Takumi used space-time magic, he could transport the Trents to Bolton without having to return. Having accepted the mission, the guild master informs him that a blacksmith is looking for a bodyguard to Horaz. If Takumi also accepts this mission, he will be promoted to rank D, and Maria and Sophia will advance to E. The young alchemist argues that he has never participated in escort missions before, so he asks where the 3 members of Lion Fangs are. Barak informs that they are on a different mission, and Takumi finds himself with no choice but to ask how long it takes to reach Horaz. Hans informs that it takes 7 days by horse-drawn carriage or 4 days by one pulled by a monster horse, but unfortunately, the guild only has regular horses available. At that moment, Riel enters the room and apologizes for using a monster horse. Surprised by the presence of the archer from Lion Fangs, Hans asks if they have already accomplished their goals so soon, and Riel responds that they haven't. They killed a black buffalo on the way, so he brought it back before it could spoil. By the way, he complains that superior species keep appearing one after the other, which greatly complicates the escort, but Barak quickly replies that adventurers are well paid for that reason. With a stern face, Riel informs that he will return in the morning to meet with the other members of the group. Then Takumi invites him to come to his house tonight to rest his body in the bathtub. Excited about the idea, the archer decides to accompany his friend until he returns home. Later, Takumi visits Papek, who agrees to lend a carriage with monster horses from the company, but in return, asks Takumi to wholesale some ores he extracts on the mission. Additionally, of course, it would be great if the alchemist produced more of those refrigerators. At the protagonist's house, Sophia notices that he's taking too long to return and wonders if something happened while she was away. Thinking about it, the elf thinks she should have gone with him. At night, on the way home, Takumi and Riel regret not finding any blacksmith who could handle mithril. They remember that of all those they visited from the list, one was absent. Suddenly, Riel senses immense hostility coming their way. When a hooded figure emerges from the forest, he grabs Takumi and runs with him, claiming they don't have enough equipment to face this adversary. However, the hooded figure was fast enough to catch up with the duo and lands a kick that knocks down the archer from Lion Fangs. At this, Sophia removes the hood and challenges the man about how he dares to touch her master. But either way, the elf assures she will deal with this troublemaker now with her sword. Takumi steps in front of the blow as quickly as possible and explains the situation. After learning everything, Sophia asks for forgiveness for attacking one of the master's friends, but the master himself apologizes for not having notified that he would arrive late. After that, Riel arrives at the alchemist's house and is amazed to see what Keed has become, commenting that she has turned all cute, but the spider makes it clear she doesn't like this guy, which emotionally shakes him. On his knees, the archer confesses it must be nice to be surrounded by beautiful girls like these, and that Heath and Bogar are married, meaning he's the only team member who's still single. Then Takumi informs that they are not his girlfriends, so Riel takes the opportunity to shine brightly and asks Sophia what she thinks of him. The elf responds that her heart and body already belong to Takumi, so the archer asks the same thing to Maria. The girl basically responds the same, then Takumi advises the guy to cry in the shower to hide it. As suggested, Riel enjoys the water with tears on his face. In the room, Sophia agrees to the hunt for the trance, as does Cade. Consequently, the leader decides that they will depart in 3 days, and by then, they will need more equipment. Sometime later, Riel says goodbye and leaves. Then Takumi takes the opportunity to work on the weapons. First, he selects a mana-draining sword made of tungsten carbide. Although it's a good weapon, it's too large to be practical. Moreover, Takumi had great difficulty handling his bow through alchemy, but his efforts paid off when, after nearly depleting all his mana, he managed to split the material into 2 smaller, lighter blades, maintaining the original power of the product. 3 days later, Takumi arrives at the north gate of Bolton and thanks Papek for the carriage. Inside was Gambo, the dwarf blacksmith who needs to be escorted to the city of Horaz. At the beginning of the journey, Keed praises how Maria handles the horses, and the human shares that she once took care of one named Furious God back at the Nolyn Company. Meanwhile, Hans passes on to the guild master information received from the Horrors branch. They say the monsters of the Death Forest are more active, so all they can do is hope Takumi doesn't encounter any superior beings on his way. At Paypet Company, a noble tells the businessman that His Majesty greatly appreciated the bathroom and would like more of those implemented in the royal capital as well. Moreover, Bolton's sewage problem is being resolved to the extent that the news has spread to the royal capital, but the noble regrets that it might have spread too far as it reached the sacred empire of Sidonia, so they might react at any moment. Months after Takumi's gift in Sidonia's castle, Akira and Yamato train hard as always to meet the expectations placed on their shoulders. While striking with his sword, Yamato recalled holding the title of judo champion at a national high school competition. Meanwhile, Akane couldn't take her eyes off the mysterious Elizabeth, who watched the training with her usual peculiar expression. Returning to Takumi after reaching a more isolated and safe region, he sets up a magical barrier to protect his escort and heads out to hunt the trance. On the way, he asks Sophia if there's a way to differentiate normal trees from trance, and she explains that it's possible to detect the mana flowing through their bodies. For example, she asks the group to focus on a specific tree and explains that it's the type of monster they are looking for. Without hesitation, Takumi attacks the target, which reacts by thrusting its roots from the ground to block his advance. After dodging the counterattack, the alchemist uses an axe to fell the tree and ends the fight quicker than he imagined it would be. However, Sophia informs him that the battle has just begun because they are completely surrounded by more trance. Due to the large number of enemies, the group resorts to magic to handle them all at once. As the fight continues, the team bravely holds their ground until an elder tree appears on the battlefield. The four combatants focus on this target and knock down several of the tree's roots, but it manages to regenerate in time and remains in the contest. Sophia suggests they focus on the tree's main body instead of the roots, so she asks Takumi to wrap his sword in fire magic. When he does, Sophia cuts several roots at once to clear a path for the alchemist, who leaps towards the body of the tree and plunges his sword into its left eye, declaring victory. At that moment, he finds a fruit dropped by the enemy, and Sophia tells him it's a miracle apple, a rare item that's very hard to eat. Excited about the fruit, Maria and Keed come over and suggest ideas for how to consume the apples. For example, Maria wants to make a pie. After successfully hunting the trance, the group arrives in the city of Horrors the following day and hitches a ride to the local adventurers guild. There, Gambo suggests that the leader accept a mission to exterminate iron moles, as these monsters feed on the minerals in the mine. Takumi agrees to the task, and they immediately go and mine the resources they find. Between swings of his pickaxe, he extracts a piece of mithril ore and soon after finds adamantite nearby. However, the group feels the arrival of an iron mole as the entire mine starts to shake. When the creature appears, everyone must react quickly. Takumi activates his light magic, stunning the creature, which makes it easier for Sophia to deliver the final blow. Kate asks what her master did, and he explains that since moles live underground, they probably aren't big fans of light. For some reason, everyone is impressed with how easily the creature was defeated, to the point where Sophia questions if it was even possible to win so effortlessly. Confused by the group's reaction, Takumi asks back if everyone really wanted such an intense battle. Maria in turn shouts that she did nothing to help and feels useless, like a mole that digs to the deepest depths and never comes out again. Regardless, the group manages to extract a large amount of ore without further issues and returns to Bolton safely. The next day, Takumi goes to Gambo's workshop to learn how to forge mithril and adamantite. Over the following days, he works hard to handle these materials, which are more complicated than magical steel. After mastering the technique, the alchemist produces armors using these valuable resources and incorporates elements that match the magic of the companions who will use them. For example, he keeps for himself the thunder armor, which enhances his agility enhancement ability and grants him enviable speed, but he needs to learn to control it before he cracks his skull on some random wall. Moreover, Takumi forges for Sophia the Storm the Wind Lance, while Maria receives a fire lance named Explosion. Swearing to always protect her master with her life, Sophia asks if it's possible to have a strong and resistant shield. However, Takumi prefers that she prioritize her own safety instead of always putting him first. Meanwhile, in the heavens, Goddess Nolyn watches over the journey of her protege but discovers that the group will soon face great dangers as their adventure continues. A year later, at Sidonia's castle, the heroes present themselves to the king, ready to set off for the kingdom of Samandor to fight for the peace of this world. Thus, His Majesty requests Annette's blessing for the warrior's departure. Back with Takumi, he works through the night crafting the shield Sophia requested and ends up exhausted at his workbench. Watching the boy's effort through the window, the elf feels bad for his condition and wishes there were someone to help the alchemist in his workshop. In the kingdom of Barcula, the king receives a letter from Sidonia stating that they have heard of the purification magic and wish to take measures about it as soon as a messenger arrives in the coming days. Realizing the hidden threat in those words, the king of Barcula crumples the letter and vows to not take this lightly. In the following days, a messenger from Sidonia approached the king of Barcula about the magical items used to purify his sewage, as the Church of Divine Light had denounced this practice to the Pope of the Sacred Empire of Sidonia. After all, they claim that light magic is a divine gift bestowed only upon the Church of Divine Light, meaning they want the patent for the purification magic circle to be handed over to them. Listening with disdain, the king of Barcula retorted that if this power is indeed a gift from their god, then the church should be able to create the magic circle themselves. Aggravated, the messenger added that according to the Pope, using the sacred purification magic on a bathroom item is unforgivable. Nevertheless, the king of Barcula refused to comply, prompting the messenger to threaten the withdrawal of all priests from the Church of Divine Light residing in Barcula. Calmly, the king stood and declared they could remove them, as it would not bother him in the slightest. In time, Takumi learned of this situation and wondered if it was wise to confront the church this way. However, Papek remained completely unbothered, explaining that there was another religion in the kingdom besides the Church of Divine Light, the Church of Creation, which worships the goddess Nolyn. Curious, Takumi asked which god the Church of Divine Light worships, and the businessman believed it to be Anat. Setting that aside, he mentioned that the kingdom of Barcula upholds religious freedom, hence it has many followers of the old Church of Creation. The priests from the Church of Creation administer recovery magic almost as a charity act, whereas the priests from the Church of Divine Light are paid fortunes to do the same. Since the topic was broached, Papek confessed he had a favor to ask. Alongside Marquis Godwin, they had shown the king the vessels with purification magic, and now His Majesty wanted to meet the alchemist personally. Papek made it clear that the king would be quite upset if the boy declined the invitation, and seeing Takumi hesitate, the businessman clasped his hands in prayer and essentially begged Takumi to accept. Thus, Takumi returned home that night to announce he was heading to the royal capital Bakulatos and requested the company of his maids, who were excited to be part of this important journey, their first time in such a significant and renowned place. Takumi warned they would depart in a week, and during this interval, he needed to prepare various things. Maria inquired about the travel time to the capital, and he informed her that it takes 7 days by horse-drawn carriage. With this, the girl committed to preparing enough food for the long journey, and Takumi took the opportunity to mention he had thought of making new cloaks for her and Sophia. Thus, he had asked Papek to obtain dark elemental magic stones for him, as he could enchant them with perception blocking. This, in addition to being useful in battle, would allow the two to walk through the city without risk of being approached by peculiar individuals. The next day, at a street fair, Maria told Sophia that Master Takumi undervalues himself greatly, and the elf agreed, noting the young man's good looks and talent as a producer and alchemist. Seeing the elf was all praises for the master, Maria approached with a suspicious look. Sophia made an excuse to leave as soon as possible, but it didn't change Maria's certainty that the elf was in love with Takumi. Meanwhile, Takumi went to the chapel to meet with Nolyn. He wanted to know if Anat, the goddess of the Church of Divine Light, was much different from Nolyn. For her part, Nolyn stated that she is the only goddess that exists, but that Takumi would learn what Anat means in due time. Now, what irritated her was the man's interest in this false goddess. Takumi explained that lately the sacred empire of Sidonia had been drawing closer to him, and remembering that some of Nolyn's blessings might be undone depending on his actions, he suspected this was what attracted Sidonia's attention. Nolyn responded that it wasn't the case, since Sidonia was the reason why Takumi was in Mildgard to begin with. In other words, this went well beyond the power level of a blessing. If so, Takumi questioned what happened with the heroes summoned by Sidonia, and the goddess admitted that she had tampered with time when she sent Takumi there, sending him a year before the heroes were summoned. In other words, they would only be called in a few months. The young man was eager to understand all this, but the goddess declared that time was up and sent the human back on the spot. Awakening in the chapel, Takumi disliked that the goddess had dodged his question, but since he didn't plan to meet the heroes, perhaps the matter wasn't so significant after all. And speaking of them, in the sacred empire of Sidonia, 10 months before Takumi's current time, the heroes were advancing with their intense training. Returning to the present, Takumi gifted his companions with cloaks, and they were delighted. The young man got too excited and remarked how beautiful the two looked in these outfits, and as soon as Maria noticed that he had crossed a line, he clasped his hands to his head in despair. He then showed the girls that he would make a special carriage for this trip, as thinking long-term, it was better to invest in one they would own rather than always having to rent or borrow. Now, the only issue was the monster horse that would pull the cart, as they were far more effective than normal horses. Apparently, the way to go was to borrow one from the guild. Hearing this, Maria laughed and asked if the master knew why Bolton was called the City of Adventurers. The young man admitted he had no idea, so the maid knelt once again in embarrassment, presuming the master knew something he did not. Nevertheless, she didn't give up and explained that Bolton is so named because various places nearby are inhabited by monsters, such as the Death Forest. Among these monsters there are unicorns, purebred horses, and griffins even stronger and faster than the monster horses. Knowing this, the group sets off the Forest of Death, and Takumi becomes curious to know if, since the dragon horse is much faster than the monster horse, they are related to dragons. Maria explains that they aren't, it's just that their appearances are similar. Sophia adds that the difference between them and regular horses is the rhinoceros-like horn and the fact that their bodies are covered in scales like dragons. In the midst of the conversation, a wild wolf suddenly appears and charges at the group. Sophia reaches for her sheathed sword, but the wolf passes right by them. Takumi thinks this is thanks to the perception block of their cloaks, which fool the wolf's nose. Despite this, Sophia removes her cloak and says it's better for them to fight to train as well, something Takumi isn't too keen on hearing. As the journey continues, the elf confronts a giant boar and ends it with a single blow. Maria is thrilled to have much more meat to prepare for the journey's meals until the team notices a dead Trent. Needing Trent wood for the carriage, Takumi thinks today is his lucky day as he was about to buy some from Papek, but with this amount he can build the entire carriage. Meanwhile, as the team members extract resources from the area, Kate gets bored and wanders alone through the territory until she finds a wounded dragon mare on the ground. The spider approaches to offer help, but the mare attacks by firing a beam from its horn. This reminds Kate of when she was rescued by Takumi, so she tells the mare that she has an incredible master who will heal her wounds. At that moment, two giant ants appear, the culprits behind the mare's injuries. Without delay, Kate ties the two up with her web, and the mare finishes them off with her beam. However, a real anthill surrounds them. Kate sets up a web barrier, but the ants begin to devour the fabric to get through. The spider tries to communicate telepathically with the master, but fails, thinking her friends have forgotten her and gone home. Severely injured, the mare loses her strength and faints, while the ants finally break through the barrier. At that instant, all Kate does is scream for the master and embrace the mare. In the next scene, she wakes up with Takumi's hand affectionately placed on her head. Kate cries and screams that she begged for her companions to come, and then they explain why the communication failed. Apparently, the barrier the spider created was so robust that it cut off the flow of mana from the outside. Later, now calmer, Kate explains the situation of the dragon mare who was severely injured. Quickly, Takumi tries to apply a healing spell, but it is repelled by the creature itself. Sophia thinks she is cautious, even though she is unconscious. Moreover, the elf feels that other monsters are approaching and that it's very dangerous to stay there for too long. Kate fears the mare will be abandoned and falls into despair, but Takumi assures her that won't happen. With that, he takes the spider and the horse to his other dimension. Sophia thinks it's reckless to put an advanced monster there without a familiar pact besides the tremendous strain it will put on Takumi's body. It replies that he's fine, but soon the weight begins to bend him until he falls to his knees. He even tries to drink a potion to recover, but ends up dropping it and collapses on the ground. Half a day later, the young man was in bed, but still hadn't woken up. Sophia notes that even sleeping, he keeps that dimension running, and unless Kate opens that dimension, the dragon mare will continue inside, causing Takumi to slowly wither. With that in mind, before the master becomes too weak, the elf takes his hand and kisses it to communicate with Kate. Inside the Alchemist's alternate dimension, the elf asks if the spider can remove the mare, but Kate fears the creature will be even more terrified to suddenly appear in an unknown place. However, Sophia explains that Takumi might die if nothing is done, so she asks her friend to create the same barrier she did in the forest, as, without the view of the surroundings, the mare will be less frightened. Finally, Kate likes the idea and promises to follow through with this plan. Having done that, Sophia announces that she will go to the Papek company to buy medicinal herbs for monsters. However, Maria asks to take on that responsibility so that the elf can look after Takumi. So when the human maid leaves, Takumi feels a warmth in his left hand unconsciously, at the same time as he hears the voices of his friends in random moments of their time together. This makes him realize that it's time to wake up. When he grazes his torso, he sees that the warmth in his hand was Sophia holding it. Seeing that the human has woken up, the elf shows surprise and relief, while the master affirms he is happy to have come with his companions. Outside, Maria watches the scene with sparkling eyes, while Takumi needs to go see the dragon mare. Soon they all go to Key's barrier, and noticing that the creature has recovered quite a bit, the alchemist asks if she wants to befriend him, just as she did with Key. At that moment, the boy activates his ability to tame the mare. Then the electricity from the horn passes to the magic circle he opened. With that done, Takumi conjures the high healing and completely regenerates his new partner. Keed asks what her name will be. Remembering that he named the spider because of the maple leaf pattern on her abdomen, the human names the mare Tsubaki, a camellia tree that has leaves all year round and blooms with red and white flowers. Maria thinks that name is beautiful, and the other companions share the opinion. Tsubaki brings her snout closer for Key to pet. Embracing the mare, the spider tells how lonely, sad, and scared she felt when she was injured in the forest, but everything changed when the master came to her rescue. To cement this happiness, Maria invites everyone to a special dinner she will prepare, and of course, everyone accepts the invitation right away. Guys, the source will be in the description, and also my brother and I created a manhwa channel. The link will be there along with the source. Check out the channel, and if you like it, please subscribe. See you.